And we are on record. Today is session number 11, June 8, 2011, Thursday. And we are discussing another group of interview questions, questions about types of testing. So we have, I believe, over 40 different types of testing, which are relatively common types. And there are lots of questions about those types. First, you will see on my screen how many? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 bullets. We have 5 bullets here. And there are a couple of rules I want you to understand when you answer questions. Rule of -0 plus we discussed last time, and it is very clear. Each and every answer you provide puts you either in negative, positive, or no advantage, disadvantage situation. You want as many pluses as possible. And in my estimation, 20% pluses will give you the job, no matter where you go. You're trying to avoid minuses because, you know, sometimes one minus is enough to really upset people. We discussed that rule yesterday. Next one, bullet number 2, is saying multiple classification criteria exist at the same time, which means exact action, exact test case or procedure you execute falls into multiple classifications. So it is never just black box testing. It's a black box, or either positive or negative, either functionality, regression, or acceptance, or this and that. So you have to understand that very clearly. It is never 1 or 2 or even 3. It is multiple. It is important to be able to answer certain interview questions. For each of type of test, when they ask you, what is this testing about? You give them the definition, and in the ideal world, you will say, you know what, when I worked on Slick Pig project, let me give you an example, I'll give you an example. And the best thing, you know, which might happen to you, you prepare. And testing type questions are unavoidable. They will ask you, what is regression? What is acceptance? What is this? What is that? It doesn't mean each and every interview will ask you all of those, but practically each and every type of testing is a very good candidate. So there is a high probability. Prepare. So when you prepare, that is what bullet number 3 is saying. When you prepare the answer, do not stop at the formal definition. Think about an example. That is how you get to the plus zone. That is how you beat everybody. Bullet number 4, for each type of test, tell what the challenge was and how you overcame the challenge at work. It doesn't mean for each and every type of testing there was a challenge. But if you think about manager coming to you and saying, listen, why don't you do this? And first you think, okay, how am I going to do that? Then you start doing it. Then few more issues come up. And then you might do it yourself, or you might talk to your manager, but eventually you find some resolution. That is exactly what we are talking about. When you do certain type of testing, how did it go? What was the challenge? How you overcame the challenge? That is what we call experience. Experience is not how many years you were pushing that button. Experience is how many things you encountered in your work, and so you can handle them now. Overcoming challenges is exactly what experience is about. Providing multiple opinions is very helpful. What it means? I'm not sure if you watched my video on test cases, but we discussed like 5 different ideas of what's test case. If you think about regression testing, acceptance testing, validation, verification, any type, guys, you will see multiple opinions. I can guarantee you. If you come to the interview and if you say, listen, it's a good question. Some people say this, some people say that. If you ask me personally, I would rather do it this way. But, and we move to the next bullet, the last bullet, we are saying whichever way you do that, by the way, how do you do that? How do you define that? Whichever way you do that, I'll be more than happy to do it your way. I mean, I'm professional enough and I'm flexible enough to pick it up and be up to the expectation. Is that part clear?
Yes.
Yeah. So if you are in a job search situation, in academic situation, you just provide one definition and you are okay. In a job search situation, job market situation, if you want to be real good, if you want to be in plus zone and beat the competition and get the job and impress people, you have to come up with multiple ideas. You have to come up with examples coming out of your experience, and you have to ask how they do that and can affirm that. It's not a problem to you. It's not a problem to accept their way of defining things. You are professional enough, you are flexible enough to do that. Now, guys, we are moving to the interview questions. We have 13 positions here, but really it's many more types of testing. We have more than one normally in the line, and you will see lots of links, and the links are pointing to Wikipedia. I did some kind of research for you, and whatever was decent there. And Wikipedia improved dramatically. A year ago, you wouldn't find much of good stuff about software testing there. So now it's brilliant. I mean, real brilliant. If you have any question, any issue, go there. It's pretty good. So what is black box testing? What is white box testing? And what is gray box testing? It is a kind of common interview question, and amazingly, as simple as it is, lots of people are making mistakes, and the foundation of the mistake is, instead of talking about what the testing is about, they talk about who is doing the testing. They are saying black box testing is testing done by testers. White box testing is testing done by developers. It is not true. Let's say you know HTML and JavaScript a little bit, and you test web application. You go to your browser, say file, view source, look at the HTML, JavaScript in that file, and find the problem at the HTML level. And you report that problem at the HTML level. You are doing white box testing. It's not who you are, it's what you are doing. Developer writes the code, pushes run button, and then the application starts on his screen. And then developer is doing positive testing. That is what developers always do from the user standpoint, trying to pretend he is a user or she is a user. Guys, developer is doing black box testing at that moment, because that is how black box testing is done. It is a behavioral testing. Testing with no access and no interest to the source code. So black box testing is testing with no access to the source code, and bugs are reported at the behavioral level. White box testing is done at the source code level, and bugs are reported at the source code level. Gray box testing is, I would call it a slang term. It's not kind of classic, perfectly defined term, but what it means, it is not black and it is not white. Whatever does not qualify for black and at the same time does not qualify for white box testing is called gray box testing. So we define it that way. As an example of gray box testing, for example, let's say you have web application which runs in your browser, and then your browser communicates with web server using HTTP protocol. So whatever you do in your browser, HTTP request goes to the server, and then HTTP response goes back to your browser. So there is some communication happening behind the browser. And is it black box testing? No. When you look at the protocol, when you look at what's happening there, it's not a black box testing, and it is not white box. You are not looking at the code. You are looking at certain things which are happening in the background. And most of the web application testing is in the domain of gray box testing. I mean, whatever you're going to be doing. So I mean, not white box and not black box, unless it is not white and not black. So we talked about black box testing, white box testing, gray box testing. Very simple, very easy, unless you make it overcomplicated. And we have exact definitions for all the stuff in questions interview questions 1, 2, 3, 4. So we have 4 files, and they come with questions and answers. That is something you learn by heart, but my job today is not that much to read the definition from the file rather than give you exactly what the differences are, where the borderlines are, and how people run into trouble answering the questions. Question number 2, what is unit testing? And then we look at integration testing, system testing, and end-to-end testing. So 4 types of testing in one question. Unit testing, as lots of people think, is part of white box testing. So if you open any book on software engineering, it talks about how developers test software. It talks about unit testing because developers test the functional unit, so a completed piece of functionality. Testers, black box testers, also do that on the functionality level, black box level. But if you say I did unit testing, nobody understands you. People think you are talking about white box testing. That is why we are talking about testing functional modules. I will not say I did unit testing. I will say I did testing of a functional module, such and such module, or multiple modules. Integration testing is when we make sure that different units work together. If you look at the source code, some part of the source code is about units. So that is one unit, that is another unit, and some part of the source code is for units working together. So unless we do integration testing, we do not cover certain part of the code. It could be done in different ways, and chapter 3 of your book talks about that, but the overall idea of integration testing is to make sure more than one unit, so they work together, 2 units, 3 units, as many units as you want. We call it integration testing, unless it comes to all the units working together as one system, so then we call it system testing, which is also very simple. Then we look at end-to-end testing. What is end-to-end testing? Some people say end-to-end testing is same as system testing because end-to-end testing is about kind of going from the very beginning to the very end of kind of business process. Let's say you open a checking account in a bank. So you start from ground zero and you end up with having the account created. Is it a system testing? It is a part of system testing. So system testing covers the entire functionality. End-to-end testing covers specific business operation. End-to-end testing corresponds to use case on the business business analyst side, on the requirement side. So when business analyst creates requirements in the form of use case, so then on QA side we would run end-to-end test to see if that specific requirement, that specific use case is properly implemented. So end-to-end test is under system testing, but it's not exactly system testing. It's a part of it. Then we look at position number 3. What is API testing? API testing stands for Application Programming Interface. Application Programming Interface testing is under white box testing. Think how it works. Developer develops software, let's say using Java programming language. Besides Java itself, there are lots of libraries used by developers. So what developer does? Developer creates a certain layer of convenience by developing functions and subroutines to be used later on, which are specific to that application. So Java language, programming language, was not developed for developing that specific application. It was developed for developing any application. So we use Java programming language to create specific layer, and we call that layer API, Application Programming Interface. So set of convenient functions and subroutines which we use to develop that specific application. Who tests API? Who tests those libraries of functions? By the way, if you think about Windows operating system and Windows applications, you will see files with DLL extension, DLL, Dynamic Linked Library. So those files are exactly the API. They contain lots of functions and the application dynamically connects to those functions without compiling them into the executable. So who tests API? Developers do, and white box testers do. And when we talk about API, we talk about test harness, which is the next couple of words after the what's API testing. Test harness is, let's call it a tool, or another term for test harness is automated test framework. Test harness is about how we organize our tests and how we execute our tests. It is a convenient utility. Lots of test automation tools come with their own harnesses. If you think about, let's say, quality center, so it has test harness in it. If you think about tools like, let's say, Visual Test and Silk, and so they have some kind of test harnesses, but lots of people develop their own harnesses using whatever programming language they like. So I developed my harnesses when I worked in Visual Test, for example. I developed harnesses in Visual Test. It did allow to do things like that, but you can use Java and C++ or any language you like. So test harness and automated test framework is the same. It is a utility from which you run test cases, control the results, organize your tests. And we have the link here. So if you actually open that window, that link in a different tab, so it brings us to Wikipedia. And let's take a look. Let's spend a minute and see what it says about harnesses. I'm not sure why is it. It's kind of slow. Let me exit. I'm sorry. Let me exit Skype because it makes things slower. Okay. So let it open. Oh no, doesn't open. Good. Then we move to position number 4. What is performance testing? And actually, it's not just performance testing. It is load, stress, and volume. Performance testing is about how your system behaves when you send more and more traffic to the system. It might be, so performance might depend on internet connection. It might depend on how powerful the backend server is. It might depend on how the code is written, so the algorithms used. It might depend on, for example, which file formats are used to represent images. And we touched it a little bit in one of the earlier sessions. But today, we have to understand the correspondence between performance testing, load testing, stress testing, and volume testing. So performance testing is basically how the system performs. Load testing is specifically about the back-end server. It is not about internet connection. It is not about sizes of images and this and that. It's about the server, how a server behaves. We talk sometimes about performance degradation of the server. One of the characteristics could be performance degradation. You increase load. You say, we have 1,000 users doing things. We have 10,000, 100,000, and then you increase the load, and then you see how server behaves. And load testing by itself is a kind of very interesting market niche on the job market, high demand niche. And load testing is done on QA side by using tools like Load Runner. On development side, they just write routines in Java or C++, so to simulate real traffic. The challenge of load testing is in understanding the characteristics of back-end servers. It's not about how to program the tool, let's say load runner, so load runner sends traffic to the server. It's about how to interpret what happens to the server. That is the major thing. Stress testing is exercising the performance at certain extreme values. So you might say, okay, you look at the kind of boundaries where your server, let's say, or your application is supposed to function. So you say, what if I go outside of the boundaries? What's going to happen? Is it going to crash? Is it going to slow down 10 times? Or so what do you expect? Volume testing is not functional testing at all. It's not about how application functions. And it is not about how fast things are happening. So stress testing and load testing and performance testing, it is pretty much about how fast. And volume testing is about how will it handle more stuff. Doesn't have to be fast, but more stuff. Let's say we are testing Gmail. And we think, well, I mean, we've been told that it should handle properly 500 million email accounts. But when you create another email account, it should make sure your account is unique. It has to compare what you offer as a mailbox name to the existing mailboxes. So you come with just one account and the system is empty. You create one account and you see, okay, how much time does it take? Okay, then you put maybe 1,000 accounts and then you create account 1001. Does it take more time? If it takes more time, how much more it takes? Then you create 1,000, 10,000, 100,000, 1 million, 10 million, and you create one more, and then one more, and then one more. And each time you create that one more account, it has to compare the name of the mailbox to 1,000, 10,000, 100,000, 1 million, 100 million existing accounts. So how does it handle that? That is pretty much the idea of volume testing. I can give you an example. I remember from my experience, I was importing data into database. So there was a big file and I was just importing data. And it was about how many records we have in that file. So if it was 500 records, it was okay, 1,000, and somewhere close to 10,000 records. I start importing and it just hangs. It never finishes. Why? I don't know why. I'm not a developer, but the matter of fact is, after a certain number, it stops really importing because of the mechanisms, you know, coded into that application code. Number 5, functionality testing. What is functionality testing? Well, I would say, if you ask me, I would say it is implementation testing. You have a requirement and you make sure requirement is implemented. No more than that. Requirement is properly implemented. That is functionality testing. Then we look at the regression testing, and to tell you about the importance of regression testing. Yesterday I compiled a list of interview questions offered by internship companies. I did that for our students preparing for internship interviews. And I brought together questions from 5 companies. All 5 companies asked what's regression testing, just to give you an idea of how important it is. When you go to the job market, it's not that much about what is regression testing. It's more like how did you do regression testing? So what was the challenge? How you overcame the challenge? Give me an example, that kind. But still, definitions are important. And in our presentation today, it's not that much about exact definition, but it's rather about what that kind of testing is, kind of what's the meaning. So regression testing is not what we do. Regression testing is why we do things. Functionality testing is not what we do. Functionality testing is why. We want to make sure it is implemented properly. Regression testing, why? We want to make sure nothing got broken after the changes were made to the code. And there was a brilliant definition on Wikipedia. Hopefully it will open that time. And Wikipedia was saying, guys, I want to see the words. I don't know why it's, So regression testing is any type of software testing that seeks to uncover new error in existing functionality after changes have been made to the software, such as functional enhancement, patches, or configuration changes. The intent of regression testing is to assure that a change, such as bug fix, didn't introduce new bugs. Guys, you cannot say it better. Really, it's very simple. It's very straightforward. And as I probably told you before, the most common mistake when it comes to regression testing is people are saying, we have to, after the bug was fixed, we have to go and make sure nothing got broken. It's not about bug being fixed. It's about code being modified for whatever reason. Further development, making patches, fixing bugs, we don't care. Anytime the code was modified, there is a chance of application being broken in some places. And if you listened to the lecture of Yana Murza, and she was talking about specific ratio which companies have. Let's say how many new bugs you introduce per 10 bugs fixed. And she was talking about average like 2.8. So almost 3 bugs. You fix 10, you statistically get about 3 new bugs. That is why we do regression testing. Smoke testing. Smoke testing is not exactly the classic kind of term. It is more like a slang, but people use that term a lot. So what is the meaning of smoke? In my words, so when I was preparing to that session, so I said it is a superficial release acceptance test. Release. So why do we do smoke? We look at the release and we say, okay, is it good enough to be taken to QA? We call it release acceptance or build acceptance testing. So smoke testing is superficial. It means we look for the major problems. And I really like the definition on Wikipedia. It says, smoke testing refers to the first test made after assembly or repairs to a system to provide some assurance that the system under test will not catastrophically fail. Guys, that is the idea of smoke testing. It will not catastrophically fail. That is what we are looking for. And if you think about where the term came from, it came from hardware. You have a piece of hardware just assembled, and there is a pretty good risk when you plug it into the power supply, power plug, it might just get burned. You will see the smoke. So in hardware terms, you plug it in and you see and you look for smoke. No smoke, good, because sometimes it might blow out, sometimes it get burned. That is the idea of smoke test. And smoke testing as a term comes with some synonyms. So for example, people say, let's do sanity test or sanity check. It is the exact same thing. You look for catastrophic problems with your software application. After it was just compiled or released or built. Then we look at user acceptance test. User acceptance test. It is a relatively new type of testing. If you look at your book, it doesn't talk about user acceptance. It talks about acceptance testing in general. And when we think about acceptance testing, it is either release acceptance, something we just talked about under smoke testing, that kind, or it is user acceptance test. There are a couple of things which we have to say about user acceptance test. Number one, it is the very last test which happens before software goes to customers. There is no testing after user acceptance test. That is number one. Number two, user acceptance test is not done by testers. User acceptance test is done by area experts. So people who understand how users are going to use that software. So it is done by area experts on behalf of users. So it is not user who does the testing. It is not tester who does the testing. It is a group of area experts, which might include a tester, which might include an advanced user, which might include business analyst, or whoever we consider to be area experts. That is very important, guys. You do not routinely do user acceptance test. It doesn't mean you just put yourself in shoes of the user and make a couple of clicks and then you write in your resume, I've done user acceptance test. Not really. And as a part of your homework, guys, I want you to go to each and every link which I placed in that section, and read about test hardness and performance and stress and volume, each and every link. So you will go and read what do they mean under user acceptance test. And I told you before, the definitions are brilliant. It does not mean one definition suffice. You might, and you should probably have more than one, so you can compare. Now, next to the user acceptance testing, we have to look at what is beta testing. Beta testing is different from beta stage of software development. When we talked about software development lifecycle, there is a coding stage, and in that coding stage we have sub-stages. We are talking about alpha stage and beta stage, and accordingly we have alpha testing and we have beta testing. But beta testing is not testing which testers do at beta stage of development. Beta testing is testing done by users. And that is why we put it under next to the user acceptance test. It is a kind of user acceptance test. We give software to interested users so they can start using it, and they will report problems which they face as users. So beta testing is done by users, not by testers who are employed by companies. I see resumes sometimes coming from Russia, I believe, and they use the term beta tester as a title, position. So they put in resume beta tester, and instead of saying tester, 50% of the time they say beta tester. Beta testing is not what QA people are doing. You cannot do beta testing if you are in QA business. What you can do, you can provide lots of testing when your software moves from alpha stage, alpha part of the coding stage, to the beta part of the coding stage of your software development lifecycle. That is the proper name for that. Browser compatibility testing, position 9. Browser compatibility testing, it is also called cross-browser testing. So either cross-browser or browser compatibility. Then we have operating system or cross-platform compatibility. So operating system compatibility or cross-platform testing, that is, those are the same. We do not have anything on that in Wikipedia. So some people just use the terms, but there is no formal definition, which is fine. We talked about that a little bit before. So the job of a browser is to interpret the code and make it visual. And it's not just what you see, but it's also about certain actions. So you click on the links, you push buttons. It is all part of that. It's not just the look. It is also the functionality. So because different browsers are developed by different groups of developers, number one, because different browsers are developed by different companies using different sets of requirements, what happens if we work for a company which develops certain application, let's say we work for Bank of America and we have online access to user accounts, so users come and move money from account to account, they write checks and this and that. Now the question is, what if one grandma is using Chrome, another grandma is using Internet Explorer, and another, I don't know, 17-year-old girl is using Firefox or Opera or whatever, whichever browser the girl likes. And the question is, do all the browsers show exact same picture in the browser? Do all the browsers allow people to actually type into the fields, push the buttons, kind of make things work? In our energy telecom project, we've seen how users using Internet Explorer browser were not able to type into the text field. So we were able to paste, but we were not able to type. So in some browsers you can type, in some browsers you cannot even type. It is a real big time problem. But to eliminate the problems, to fix the problems, we can fix them. So our developers can write the code in certain subset of the language using certain rules and of the game. So all the browsers will show exact same picture and all the browsers will work properly. We can do it. It takes time, it takes additional effort, but we can do it. Same story with operating systems. Exact same company, let's say we have Microsoft doing browsers for not just Windows operating system, but you can use it under Unix, and I'm not sure about Macintosh. If you think about Safari browser, which comes from Apple, it runs on Apple platform, but it also runs on Windows. They now make it available on Windows. Guys, I can assure you, if you run that on Windows, let's say 7, Windows Vista, Windows XP, and you compare to Mac OS 10, you will see lots of inconsistencies, and it might work or not work on one and another one. So, and we are using exact same version of exact same browser developed by exact same company using exact same set of requirements. And it is not going to be the same because the operating systems are not the same. And actually teams of developers are not the same. People who develop browser for Macintosh are different from people who develop browser for Windows 7, for sure. So that is pretty much where browser compatibility, operating system compatibility kicks in. In today's world, it takes a very substantial kind of role in testing, and we have to plan for it, and we have to spend lots of money doing that. And another question coming out of that domain will be, what are the problems you expect when you do that? First, I would focus on functionality, and I would say I expect sometimes I push the button and button doesn't do anything. I click on the link and link doesn't bring me anywhere. So functionality problems. I hope you've seen on the status bar of your browsers, you've seen messages like JavaScript error. You push a button or you try to do something, it doesn't do it, and on the status bar in the left corner, it says JavaScript error. Where does it come from? It comes from your browser, and it is a typical browser compatibility, operating system compatibility problem. In case you can do it on one browser, you cannot do it in another browser. It is a browser compatibility problem. So functionality is one set of issues. And then graphic user interface. You have numerous examples. If you ever try to use 3 browsers at a time, and so you look at same page, web page from 3 different browsers, you will see lots of differences. Look at that page which we are looking at right now, the portnov.com/online. You will see dramatic differences, and I've seen it. That is why I don't like the Chrome browser, because when I look through Chrome, it's so much different from what I actually created for you. Okay, it just looks different. They will ask you, or actually even if they don't ask you, it's a good idea to come with an example. Saying, you know what, one day I was testing something and I was just really amazed with how far it might go and how dramatic it could be. Then position number 10, we are talking about equivalence partitioning, boundary testing, boundary value analysis. So the original question was, what is boundary testing? But to talk about boundary testing, we have to talk a little bit about equivalence class, equivalence partitioning, and boundary value analysis. So we have equivalence classes, and equivalence class is a set of values, input values, which result in exact same response by the system. So same output. Different inputs which produce same output. And the idea of finding out equivalence classes, defining those classes, is we need just one representative of the class to test. If all of them are supposed to produce same result, I don't have to test all of them. I just take one and execute the test. So it saves lots of time on testing. And that is one of the techniques used for writing test cases. Then how do I know where the class begins, one class begins and another class ends? So I have to find boundaries, borderlines between classes. And that is where we use boundary value analysis. And when you find boundaries, guys, we have the classes. Whatever is in between boundaries is classes. But boundary testing by itself is a separate technique because we look at the boundary and we are saying, well, since lots of things happen on boundaries, around boundaries, in close proximity to boundaries, let's look at the boundary and test it what is right on the left and what is right on the right of the boundary. So if our behavior of the application changes on January 1st, so let's try December 31st and let's try January 1st and make sure it changed right where it belongs. And lots of things happen right on boundaries. So that is why we are interested in doing boundary testing. And guys, one more time, we have 3 links in the position number 10, equivalence partitioning, boundary testing, boundary value analysis. You are expected to go and read exactly what the Wikipedia says on that, not to mention the 4 links down below where we have our own definitions, which you also read and compare with what Wikipedia says. And when you go to an interview, you have at least 2 different standpoints. If you have enough time and curiosity to go to, let's say, YouTube and see what other people are saying about, this type of testing or that type of testing, do it. I mean, you might find wonderful stuff there. What is error handling testing? And in round brackets, we have different term for same thing. It is called exception handling. Let's say somewhere in the background, when your application runs, it comes to dividing something by 0. And software cannot divide by 0. So some exception gets generated, and if you write solid code, robust code, it will handle situations like that. It will produce an error message, or it might ask you to do something. But if it is not handled properly, so then the application might crash or hang or behave in any disastrous way possible. So error handling testing or exception handling testing is about making sure, so there is not, if something happens like that, that application will provide a decent response. It will not crash, it will not hang, it will not generate idiotic messages, but it will do something nicely telling you what to do and kind of explaining the situation. So the code is intelligent enough to do that. So guys, developers can do it. If they pay attention, they have lots of tools to really control, lots of opportunities to control the exceptions, the disastrous behavior, things like that. Ad hoc testing and exploratory testing. We talked about ad hoc, we talked about exploratory, and maybe since it was the very first session here in the class, maybe we gave you a little bit simplified view of that. It is not exactly monkey testing. Ad hoc is not exactly monkey testing. By the way, ad hoc is a subset of exploratory. Let's start with exploratory. Exploratory testing means your vision of what you test and how you test and what is next is based on what you learn. So you start with something which allows you to learn a little bit about how application behaves. So it is kind of informal testing. You do not have any plan. You might have an idea, you have a purpose for sure, you're learning, but still you start with something and then you learn a little bit. And what you learn changes the way you think about what's next. So that is the idea of exploratory testing. And if you read what the Wikipedia says about that, guys, there is a very substantial amount of information. I don't want you really go too far in depth, but still, it is not that simple. There is certain methodology involved. It is not just exactly intuitive. Ad hoc, some people, when you ask them, what is ad hoc? They tell you, you know what, it's like no-brainer. Click here, click there, whatever comes to your mind, just do it. Not exactly. It is a subset of exploratory. It is the least formal testing. You have no limitations. You have whatever idea comes to your mind, you are welcome to do that, and you are supposed to do that. But still, a certain amount of brain and a certain amount of interest in what you are doing is supposed to be there. When you look from outside, it looks like a monkey, you know, or a rabbit, kind of Energizer bunny, you know, clicking all around. But it's not exactly like that. It looks like that, but it is not. Since you are not a monkey and you have brain, and anytime you do that, you kind of create. To do that monkey testing, you create that monkey testing in your mind. Okay. Localization and internationalization testing, two types we have left. Certain applications are being adjusted to a different environment. Let's say we have Microsoft Word. At some point, Microsoft decided to modify the Microsoft Word, and not just Word, the entire package, modify it for, let's say, being used in Spanish-speaking countries, and in French-speaking countries, and then in Russia, in Israel. So we have many different languages. The operating system itself, you know, is being done for many different languages, and which is different story. So someone has to translate all the menu items and menu titles and dialog boxes, all the graphic user interface things into, let's say, French. Then you have to translate, obviously, the documentation and help and all that kind. Then, let's say we use dollars in the United States, and we use, now it's euro, and before it was francs in, so currency. Then there might be different time and date formats used in different countries. If your application is doing, let's say, accounting, then accounting standards are different. Taxation standards are different. I mean, really, you have to sometimes rewrite chunks of code to adjust that application to a specific country. Even in the United States, if you look at taxation software, guys, we have 50 different states, and there are no two states with exact same taxation rules. So it changes from state to state. So we have to do localization of the taxation software to different states. We don't have to touch language. We don't have to touch professional terminology, this and that, but we have to touch proportions and maybe introduce certain taxes in Alaska which are not applicable in California or Florida. So that is localization. We localize to language, currency, time and date format. Sometimes it might be same language. Let's say you do Microsoft Office in Spanish, but in Cuba it's one set of kind of, well, the language, let's say, is different from Chile. I don't know exactly if it is the case. Might be a little bit different. Or let's say English in Australia, in South Africa, or UK might be slightly different from, let's say, United States. When you do spell check in Microsoft Word, it asks you which dictionary do you want, US English or you want British English. So it allows you to actually customize at that level. Internationalization is opposite to localization. We are saying, okay, let's create some software which will allow us to use exact same application no matter where we are in the world. Let's say you have a laptop, and on your laptop you have Windows XP installed, for example, and you go to China, which is maybe 8 or 10 hours, time difference from where you are. You know what? You can still go to Windows, change settings, and your computer will work in local time. Or you can change time and date format to wherever you are in the world. So operating system itself allows you to do a little bit of internationalization. Sometimes you might choose a language. Have you seen websites where you go to the website and it has like 5-6 icons with different flags? Let's say Spanish, French, German, English, and you click on that flag and the application comes in different language. That is a kind of internationalization. So you come, you make changes, and then here you are. It doesn't matter where you are and what language you need. The application is the same and it will do exact same job. That is pretty much what we wanted to discuss today. And so you understand the homework. Let's see. Jana asked me to put that HTML. So you finish the HTML self-paced course because she needs to refer to HTML Monday in her class. You watch GoToMeeting recording for this session. You watch GoToMeeting recording for previous session, and you have the whole week in front of you. And then you have those 4 files. What we want you to do, guys, we want you to be able to talk about each question in session number 11 today and session number 10 yesterday, all those 24. So 24 plus, looks like 13, but I think it's more than 20. So practice in explaining what it is. Unless you practice, unless you write it down, guys, and revisit multiple times, you are not going to have any success when it comes to the real interview. You have to be prepared. That is the only way to really perform well. Some people say, you know what, I understand what it means, so when they ask me, I'm going to be able to do that. Not really. Not really. Interview is a stressful situation. Lots of things sometimes is at stake. So you don't want to take chances. You really want to practice, and when you go to an interview, just reproduce. Instead of thinking, oh God, what could it be, and then, losing the advantage you have or might have. Now, we are coming back to you in case you have questions, and I think you should have questions. I mean, that is what I expect, but let's see, guys. Anybody?
I have one question.
Sure.
Do you have one example for smoky testing? How critical it must be?
Smoke testing? It's not smoky. It's okay.
Smoky.
No, smoke.
Smoky testing, sir.
Smoke.
Smoke.
Example of a smoke test. Well, my first test automation project was for smoke test, or you can call it release acceptance test. We had a release engineer who comes to the company, let's say around 10 p.m. and so he takes all the stuff, all the pieces of code developers modified, and then he starts compiling them together, and maybe 2 a.m., 3 a.m. he has the build compiled. But the release process itself, or building process itself, is buggy. When he has build ready at 2, 3 a.m., he doesn't know if the build is good enough. So I was given an assignment to write test automation script, which he runs. So he pushes the button, and the script might take maybe 10 minutes. It will execute maybe 200 different things, which we discussed with the manager, development manager actually, not QA, but development manager. So development manager says, okay, there are certain things which are high risk stuff, so let's focus on this. And he asked me to perform certain transactions, so creating accounts, moving data from place to place, that kind. So which I automated. It wasn't really testing. It was about simulating certain user activities and making sure I can really get to the logical end of that. So if I want to create an account, I create an account. That is what my smoke test was about. You can do it manually, you can do it automatically, but it is a good candidate for automation. But we were looking for major catastrophic issues, like you are not able, user is not able to perform the very basic operations. It was not about sophistication of any kind. Very basic operations, and what's included, you have to discuss with people. It's not for you to decide.
Okay.
Did I answer your question?
Yes.
Okay.
Definitely. Thank you.
Waiting for more questions.
Mike, can I ask?
Sure.
We must answer it on question on interview, like learning by rote, or we have to talk with the employer.
What do you mean employer? You go to an interview, and in average, in the United States, when you look for a QA job, you will talk to 4 people in average. Could be 3, could be 5, could be 1 sometimes, but in average we are looking at 4 people, and each of them might be talking to you either half an hour or 45 minutes or maybe 1 hour. Sometimes I see people who tell me, oh God, it was 3 hours interview. Guys, 3 hours interview means you have 4 people, 45 minutes each, which is perfectly fine. I mean, it's not a big deal. So you talk to 4 people, and 4 people normally are different in their function. So one could be QA manager, another one could be senior developer, another one could be a QA team member. And then it depends on the company size. Let's say if it is a startup with like 20 people working, it might be a marketing guy. It might be, anybody. Sometimes president, of the company. I was interviewed by company. I was employee number 7 in that company. So when I came, it was just 6 people, and I talked to all 6, marketing, sales, and president, and everybody, because we are a small team. So their interest in you is different. If you talk to 4 people, it doesn't mean all of them will be pretty much asking you about specifically testing. They might be asking, looking at you from different perspectives. And when we are saying that how you answer the question really depends on who you are talking to, it's true, because same question asked by developer or let's say tester might really imply different answers, because their interest in you is different. And to keep them happy, you have to tell something to tester, looking at the problem from QA perspective, and you have to tell something to developer, looking at that from his perspective, trying to give him the answer to satisfy his curiosity or, respond to his concern. So again, when you go to the job interview, it is not that much about definition. It is more about how you did that, under which circumstances, and what you learned by doing that. But see what happens. You start talking about something, and they say, you know what exactly do you mean when you say regression? Because in their company it might have different meaning. What exactly do you mean under performance testing? So in the company where you worked, what did you, when you say beta testing, what is the meaning? And then you have to come up with a kind of definition, you know, or close to the definition. And so even though they do not ask you for definition, at some point it might come to the definition. It's very important to know definitions. It's like driving a car. You might say, yeah, I can drive a car, but you know what? It helps to know the rules. So lots of people violate the traffic rules, not because they do not respect the rules, they just don't know the rules. And some people violate the traffic rules because they have no choice and they make conscious decision to go against the rules because of the certain circumstances. So we want you to be in control. So you know what's regression, okay? You know what's smoke, you know what's internationalization or boundary. I'm not sure if I answered your question, but we will talk a lot about interviewing. I mean, we just crossed the equator of our class. We are in session 11 out of 20. And out of remaining 9 sessions, maybe half we will be talking about interviewing and different aspects of that, job search. Any more questions, guys? Nobody says anything. Okay, then let me say bye to you and remind you that Monday we meet at 5 local time, not 6, so 1 hour earlier, because last time lots of people missed the timing. And so I wish you good luck in learning and lots of knowledge to be obtained.
Thank you.
Oh, my pleasure.
Thank you.
Have a good night. Hey guys, it's so funny, Michael. I kept unmuting myself and talking, but it's a new microphone and I had mute on the actual microphone. So
Okay.
everything I said wasn't even used. So, well, thank you for everything, guys.
Okay, my pleasure.
I'll see you everyone on Monday.
Okay, guys.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Bye.